Hey there, Changemakers, and welcome to the Seeding Social Good podcast by Turnkey. I'm Katrina VanHuss, chair and founder of Turnkey, and this podcast is all about figuring out what works to help us all do more good faster. Whether you're watching this webinar or hearing this as a podcast, we're glad you're here. But seriously, get outside, rake the grass, take a walk. Let us whisper in your ear for a little bit. In this episode, Dr. Otis Fulton, social psychologist, and my husband, and I will continue the conversation about how recognition works at the psychological level. Part 2. Let's go. What exactly is wrong with the traditional recognition gift program? First, what is that? It means we make a promise to a fundraiser that if they raise a certain amount of money, we're going to give them a gift post-event. That's how 90% of recognition gift programs work. And in 3 decades, we have not changed that pattern. Except for some upgrades for technology, we really haven't changed that at all, in spite of everything that we've learned about human decision-making. Number 2, product delivered post-event can have some impact on this year's revenue as long as it's paired with the right communications. But it's really largely about reinforcing the identity, the attachment of that person to their tribe, which means that the bulk of the impact is next year. Number 3, when we deliver a recognition gift product to a person's home, we do it in a completely private recognition gift ceremony. Completely private recognition gift ceremony. Those words don't even make sense together. Next, being recognized is joyful, it's powerful, and for some unknown reason, we decided they only get to have that joy once a year after the event, when it can't impact this year's fundraising. And then last, we've been training people to fundraise for product, and that's not positive. We knew this from watching public media, and we still went and did it. Darn. So I want to take you through how we got to where we are today. And I want to start in the way back when we started this company, or I started this company, which was the day after I got fired from another job, and we'll talk about that in a bar one day. Way back in 1989, behind the scenes, how were we talking about product? What did it sound like?
Raise $500 and get a suite trombones for Venezuela Cup.
That's what it sounded like, pretty much. So back then, we had always had tension with product. We knew it. And for a couple of decades, we've known that using gifts to motivate behavior can lead to problems. If we put an incentive out there, and that's the language we used then, we could get people to fundraise. It felt like a quid pro quo, but it worked. But we saw in the data something weird. When we gave someone a better gift, a nicer gift, a more valuable gift, the less the fundraiser who took it came back the next year. And if we use gifts that were called fungible, something like a TV or a grill or a tent, something that could be later sold, not that they would, but they could. We call it fungible, and what we found is that that effect was even bigger when we used that type of gift. So while this quid pro quo worked, or seemed to, in the moment, there were future deleterious effects. So then we went to 2005. And what were we saying about product in 2005?
We just know you can make it to $500. Keep it going. You're almost there. There's a sweet cabinet for you to show all your friends you're committed.
That literally is the language that we used and that many of us are still using. So while we knew that the fungible thing was bad, and we'd come to understand why, we were putting people in a transactional relationship. That's why it was bad. But what we also knew was that there was another body of work that said, if it can't be considered valuable enough to be paid, to be fungible, then it won't put someone in a transactional relationship with us. So at that point, we started recommending to our clients, give a gift with a lower perceived value. And we kept pulling back on that and get it less and less valuable. And what we were doing is applying behavioral economics. And it worked better than before. It worked pretty well. And then let's go to today.
You care. That's the only reason you would have gone out of your way to raise $500. You will be responsible for curing this disease because you are a good and caring person. Thank you. P.S. Our gift in thanks.
So that handling is really, really different. We had been reading for years about donor-centric efforts, and that made a lot of sense to us. And in fact, we thought that's what we were doing. But we started digging in more deeply yet again. And what we learned led us somewhere new. In 2017, we wrote a book called Dollar Dash, The Behavioral Economics of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising. And that book encapsulated peer-to-peer and behavioral economics. And while everything in it is relevant and true, there's more. It's deeper. We just didn't go far enough. So let's do that. So Otis is not going to use his radio voice, which I particularly enjoy, actually. And he is going to show us what social science tells us about giving rewards. Buckle up.
Yeah, psychologists have been talking about these, what they call free choice behaviors, things that people do because they want to do them or because they love to do them in some cases for a long time. And I like to use this example. Imagine you invite your sister over to help you clean out your garage one Saturday afternoon, okay? Would you say, if you stay an hour, I'll give you a water bottle. And if you stay for 2 hours, I'll give you a $25 Starbucks gift card. And if you stay for four hours, I'll give you a down-filled jacket in your size. You never say that. What you do is she'd come over, you'd have a good time, you'd clean out the garage, and you'd give her a hug, and you'd tell her she was the greatest sister in the world, and then maybe you'd give her a bottle of wine, and as she left, and she'd enjoy it later on and think back fondly about your day. Well, somewhere along the line, we've all told our constituents that they're a member of our family, but we just don't treat them like one. And again, there's a lot of research in this area. This one was done 21 years ago. It's one of the best. If you remember your statistics classes, this is a meta-analysis. So this was an analysis of 128 studies on giving extrinsic rewards to people who were doing these intrinsic behaviors, things that they wanted to do. And I've kind of summed it up in one short little graph here. And this is it. So to interpret this, the black means neutral. People were no more or less likely to repeat the behavior. Red is that they were less likely to repeat the behavior, and green is that they're more likely to repeat the behavior. So just simple thank you, or in what we would call impact communications in nonprofit. These are things that happen because of your activity. That tended to make people want to come back and do the behavior again, to donate again, as a matter of fact. Red, people were less likely to repeat the behavior, so tangible gifts had a demotivating impact on people. When you broke that down, it's interesting, unexpected gifts had a neutral effect. I'd like to test that. This really wasn't done in the nonprofit world specifically, and I think that branded items are, as an unexpected gift, is a really good device. Expected gifts, telling people that if you raise $500, if you raise $1,000, if you register, you're going to get these gifts. It was demotivating. People tended to not come back and repeat the behavior. So again, this research has been out there for a long time. And although this is a 20-year-old study, there are many, many more current studies than that.
Why does recognition work at all? It works because we have embedded inside us this deep thing that some would call a feature and some would call a flaw. And it is that we are desperate to be seen. Recognition is being seen.
Yeah, and there is a good reason why recognition is so motivating. Let's go into evolutionary psychology a little bit. This is a picture of the African savanna. This is where 98% of our ancestors lived in small groups, and this is where our modern brains evolved to survive. And the biggest factor for survival on the savanna was sociability, how well you got along with and interacted with members of your group. And humans over the millions or thousands, hundreds of thousands of generations became hardwired for sociability. And it turns out that recognition is a major social cue. Being recognized by your group told you that when there were resources to be shared, you would be included. And that was a matter of survival. So our antenna for recognition became very, very finely tuned over the generations. And, this was a theory in psychology for many years. And then About 15 years ago, MRI machines, brain scanners, became very widely available to psychologists, and they proved it. It turns out that when you put people into brain scanners and have them read simple little recognition statements, things like, when I need help, you're always the person I can turn to. The reward pathway of the brain that lights up is the same reward pathway that lights up when people eat their favorite food. So that's how fundamental the response to recognition is. And it's a very interesting area of study. It turns out you would expect that for people that you know who recognize you. It turns out you have the same effect for people who are complete strangers who recognize you. Again, that's how finely tuned our antenna is. And we know that people want to be recognized. You know, as I got into this research 7 years ago after I met Katrina, I was a little bit surprised to learn that of the billions of dollars that are donated to charity every year, less than 1% is donated anonymously. And psychologists also know that people behave in what they call more pro-social behaviors, just doing good things when they're in public as opposed to when they're in private. So we're going to talk about philanthropic psychology now. Katrina mentioned that in 2017, we wrote Dollar Dash, the Behavioral Economics of Peer-to-Peer Fundraising. Philanthropic psychology is the next step beyond behavioral economics. Behavioral economics, you probably heard about nudges. Behavioral economics is about getting people to do something in the moment, like donate, like volunteer, like whatever it is that you're asking them to do on behalf of your nonprofit. Philanthropic psychology is about sustainability. And in fact, the work is in this area is being led by Dr. Adrian Sargent and Dr. Jen Shang at the UK Institute for Sustainable Philanthropy. According to philanthropic psychologists, what affects a person's decision to help a nonprofit organization when they read messaging or get communications? Now, most of us think that it's the emotion of the appeal, that we have to make people feel some way in order to get them to act. And that is important. But philanthropic psychologists, the research tells us that there's something that's more important, and that is the supporters' goals, their identity. Am I an animal rights advocate if I'm reading something about rescuing dogs? About the perceived impact. What are my goals? What do I want to accomplish through my philanthropic activity? Do I want to feed school kids who don't have school lunches now? So it's these supporter goals that are really more important than the emotion of the appeal. People have many identities. I'm a University of Virginia alumni. I'm a father. I'm a fundraising professional. I'm a husband. And so there are many identities that we can call out in order to connect with me. I want to show you some research that was done by, I always will butcher her name, Kiki Koumouridou. She is Greek, over in the UK as well. And this was a Facebook ad that tailored messaging to the recipient's identity. Now, these went to only doctors, nurses, people in the medical profession. This is for Make-A-Wish. And so the one-size-fits-all message was, when you donate and help grant a wish, you help her fight her illness. Okay? And then in the other condition, they just added one sentence: as a medical professional, you know the heartache of a child diagnosed with a critical illness, and then the same. So that was the only difference in the messaging.
So Otis,
Yes.
Before you go ahead, I want to, because this is a heavily peer-to-peer audience, I want to connect this to, this would be the same as an acquisition message for a peer-to-peer fundraiser. Completely the same in terms of how the human will react. Just because it's direct response does not make it not viable for peer-to-peer acquisition.
Absolutely. So the identity-based messaging increased the response by 41%. A huge effect. One other example I wanted to show you. This is a little bit different. This is an identity-based ad versus a gift ad. This was a Facebook ad to get people to sign up for Ducks Unlimited membership. Backed by popular demand, join, renew, or extend your Ducks Unlimited membership today and receive the Ducks Unlimited quilted jacket as our gift to you. Now, that response rate was 1.3% of people that saw that ad on Facebook converted. And then they tried an identity-based message to get people to sign up for Ducks Unlimited, which was this, the conservationist identity. And they, by the way, they bought they bought lists from organizations like the Audubon Society, other organizations that had conservationists in it. And they said, as a conservationist, you know how important the wetlands are to flood control, clean water and the wildlife who call them home, help our shared ecosystem and be a supporter of one of the world's largest conservation organizations. In other words, no jacket. And the conversion rate for this ad was identical.
So if I could jump in here, this is stunning. And you got to wonder, why didn't we know about it? And the reason we didn't know about it is because we didn't want to jump into someone else's silo for information. That was direct response. And we're over here in peer-to-peer. And we didn't go there. When we did our analyses in the past, all of us, we've compared a gift ad, so to speak, whether it's an email or social, mainly email. We compared it to messaging that had nothing to do with the identity of the recipient. So if we were going to message without identity attributes, the way that this is done, we better have a jacket because it would have failed without it. So this is a head-to-head in a way that we've never gone head-to-head before. You know, having this type of identity messaging, we simply haven't done in peer-to-peer. We simply haven't done it. And we needed the jacket if we didn't have it. That's what it came down to. So how do we, normal humans who are not PhDs in psychology, how do we make use of this? And the framework which we've created to help do that is called you-centric design. And by using this, that's how people like you and me can accomplish it. Otis?
Sure. I'm going to talk about messaging for a few minutes. Jeff Brooks has a wonderful website, Future Fundraising Now. If you don't subscribe to it, I recommend it highly. He some time ago described the way most nonprofits talk to their supporters as the Batman model. And I tell you, this is not the model that you want to aspire to. In the Batman model, Batman's the boss, Robin is the helper, his sidekick. Batman gets all the glory. He drives the Batmobile. He's got a cooler costume. He's got a utility belt. The Batman model puts the organization in the starring role, and the donor is the helper, the Robin character whose donations or support enable the organization's work. And so Batman fundraising is full of phrases like, please donate so we can help us support the children, support this great work, and so forth. And the you-centric model represents really a fundamental shift in your thinking. Donors are not giving to you or fundraising for you. They're giving and fundraising through you to make something they care about happen. And remember, we talked earlier about in philanthropic psychology, it's the supporter's goals. It's their identity. Is this who I am? The kind of person that saves animals, that feeds children, and so forth. And what are the goals that I have? So this is a real shift. Now, it's understandable why organizations don't talk like this. So this is how most nonprofits talk. I call it you whatever. We did this, we did that, we were amazing, and by the way, thank you. Now, they do that because they think that they have to prove to the supporter that their missions are worthy of their support. But it turns out that this raises much more money. A you-centric wrote, because of you, all these amazing things will happen. Without you, they won't. This kind of messaging really empowers people. It using BOY, because of you language. Because of you, these things happen. Before and after stories, kind of the coin and currency of nonprofit language. This person was homeless. Now they've got a roof over their heads. Telling them why you are needed. Why is this your fight? This is why you're needed. And make them a part of something that psychologists call this people's need for connectedness, making them part of something bigger than themselves. Right now, that is so important. People feel more isolated than they probably have ever in their lives right now. And we have such a great gift to give them through nonprofit work.
So What we've demonstrated, we hope, is that use-centric messaging makes a lot of sense. And it makes a lot of sense because it's more effective, and it's more effective because it talks about who the person is and triggers them to behaviors that reflect who they are. So is that the only place it can manifest, just in words? Or should every touch point manifest? So the words Otis has been using, they can manifest in email, website, social media, print, anything, but also they can manifest in the recognition gift program, which we talked about, and how to do that, not just by what kind of gift you use, but the language with which you position it. But also, if you've got human beings talking to your constituents, shouldn't this use-centric messaging happen there too? So now we're into not just scripting, but into training about how to talk to people. It's not that I'm asking you, Mary Beth, to help the Canine Companions for Independence to help with our walk. No, we want you to own it because it reflects who you are and language that supports that. And then lastly, and perhaps most important, in peer-to-peer, we have the ability to touch people more than most revenue channels because we create an environment that has multiple touch points, not just at the moment of donation, but at multiple points as we ask people to fundraise and ultimately donate as well. So use-centric can manifest in event design as well. So when we're engaged to help a client either tune up a peer-to-peer property or to create a new one, what we typically start with are business requirements. How do you write requirements? Typically, it looks a lot like this, raise X amount of money and X amount of time. We're going to use a staff-driven model or a volunteer-driven model. We're going to make one event versus a series of events. These are the kinds of questions that we ask. And the reason that we ask those is because we're setting the business requirements of the organization. But are those the requirements that we should be designing around? Or potentially, should it be the human being? So if we thought about it differently, if we started designing event constructs around the needs of the human being, here's one example of what that could look like. This is one business requirement. I don't want to imply that this will cure all ills because the human is way more complex than that. But one thing we know is that human beings respond impressively to what we call the trifecta of satisfaction. Otis?
Yeah, this comes out of an area of psychology called positive psychology. It's called self-determination theory. And positive psychologists have found that people who are satisfied with various aspects of their life report having three things. They report having autonomy, a sense of self-determination, that they're in charge. They're not being micromanaged. They're not in a situation they don't want to be in. Competence. They're engaged in doing something that they can get good at, that they can be good at, successful at, and they have an opportunity to get better. And then being a part of something bigger than themselves. I mentioned earlier this need, psychologists call it connectedness, that they're involved in something that's bigger than their own self-interest, that really goes beyond them in some way.
So, does the other stuff matter? How much money, what platform, staff support model? Of course it does. It matters. But if your constituent is happy and satisfied, they'll exhibit the behaviors you want in larger percentages. This is not fluffy stuff. This is science. We're talking about designing for the ultimate consumer, the participant. If we make them happy, if we make them satisfied, they join us, they exhibit the behaviors we need because we made them happy and satisfied. So what we're going to do is use one example. If we use use-centric design for events, one outcome might be that we decide to use volunteer leadership. Now, right now, somewhere on the East Coast, Bob Merrill is pounding the desk because he did this, and I applaud it, with team and training. So an example of use-centric design, an outcome would be, if I'm trying to meet those three needs, what can I do in terms of designing my event construct that will give people that will give the average participant that? And one of the answers to that is volunteer leadership. Giving someone a job is the highest form of recognition. And giving someone a job also satisfies their psychological need, not just for recognition, but for autonomy and to be part of something bigger than themselves. So that's why truly volunteer-driven programs raise more than staff-driven models. An example would be, well, two good examples, Relay for Life and the Alzheimer's peer-to-peer properties. Both of them lean heavily on volunteer-driven aspects. They have a well-built out, a well-thought-out, and a well-supported volunteer leadership infrastructure. That is their secret sauce. And now you understand it. They are simply meeting the emotional and psychological needs of their participants. They are satisfying their customer and making them happy. Notice that sentence had not much to do with the mission, did it? It had to do with the customer, the consumer, the participant. So another really great question, which if no one asked, I'm just going to ask it of myself. Why is it so hard to get staff to embrace a volunteer-driven model? And the answer is right there. Because staff people are human too. And they fear loss of autonomy, which is definitely going to happen if you go with a volunteer-driven model. They fear loss of recognition, which if the recognition is going to the volunteers, I am playing second fiddle now. They do get to stay connected to the whole. So that is the reason most conversions fail, is because we don't address the needs of everyone. We just design and tell them to go forth without figuring out, is everybody going to be happy and meeting those needs? So, lastly, like soccer, youth-centric design looks easy. With soccer, virtually anyone can kick a white ball, right? It rolls. It's a huge goal. I mean, how hard can it be? It's pretty hard once you try. And youth-centric design is like that too. It's pretty hard when you start into it. And then you have the added layer of complexity of this. Let's say you got it. You wrote your design. And unlike some organizations, I know like the Hydrocephalus Association, where the whole group is bought into this, in your organization, you write copy or you do event design. And then whatever the work is you did, it's got to go to legal, it's going through Marcom, the CEO's brother Bob, who wrote a novel once, he might have some good ideas, right? And by the time it gets back to you, it looks nothing like what you started with. So this youth-centric design thing, you either embrace it as an organization or you don't, because it is tough if not everybody is bought in and has an understanding of it.